They thought I was just another junior developer with a big idea and no leverage. After months of late nights, trial runs, and testing, I finally built a product that could change everything for our industry, a software tool so unique it caught the attention of investors. But when I brought it to the table, my own company offered me $1,000 to walk away quietly. No negotiation. No recognition. Just hush money. What they didn't know. I had already filed the IP. And 2 days later, I signed a $3 million licensing agreement under my own name. They tried to bury me, but I brought the receipts. The idea came to me in the middle of a sleepless night after yet another rejected pitch at work. I'd spent over a year developing a prototype platform, a smart logistics management system that would optimize supply chains using predictive AI and real-time adjustment algorithms. I called it Pathweaver. It was lean, adaptable, and efficient, everything our existing system wasn't. But every time I brought it up to management, I was met with disinterest or worse, condescension. "We're not in the business of sci-fi," they'd joke. But I knew what I had. I'd built the base model in my spare time using open-source tools and integrated it with mock datasets to demonstrate proof of concept. My intention wasn't to go rogue, I was loyal to Javelin Tech. I just wanted them to take a chance on innovation. But instead, they pushed back at every turn. My manager, Carl, once pulled me aside and said, "Stick to what's on your desk." No one asked for a revolution. That was the culture there. Play your role, don't make waves, and above all, don't outshine the system. I tried to stay in line, but the more I saw inefficiencies piling up, the more I felt the need to act. Pathweaver could cut fulfillment delays by 40% and save mid-tier distributors millions annually. I'd run the simulations, double-checked the code, and even invited a few trusted colleagues to test early builds. Quietly, they agreed, it worked. So, I did something that would come back to haunt management. I filed a provisional patent under my name and locked the IP with my personal legal counsel. I wasn't trying to burn bridges, I just wanted to protect the work I'd spent 14 months building. At that point, no one from the company had contributed a line of code or a dollar of funding. It was mine. And just to be safe, I documented every step, every git commit, every version history log, every design draft, with timestamps and notarization. It was airtight. Then came the turning point. I presented a stripped-down version of Pathweaver at a small regional tech demo day. I didn't mention Javelin Tech, but I did explain that the system could integrate with existing platforms to reduce logistics drag by half. I expected curiosity at most, but after my 12-minute presentation, I was approached by a VP from one of the largest shipping conglomerates in the region. He handed me his card and said, "If what you just showed is scalable, you've got a gold mine." That was the moment I knew I was onto something big. I went back to work the next week, energized. I didn't want to leave Javelin Tech out, I genuinely hoped they'd partner with me and help scale Pathweaver. I scheduled a meeting with Carl, the head of product, and our CFO. I laid out the numbers, the demo response, and even the licensing inquiry I'd received. I expected skepticism. I expected questions. What I didn't expect was silence, followed by the CFO clearing his throat and saying, "This IP technically belongs to us." That hit me like a truck. "No," I said calmly, "it doesn't. I developed this off the clock, using my own resources, on my personal devices. I even checked with a lawyer before filing." Carl leaned back, expression unreadable. "You're still our employee. You signed a standard innovation clause in your contract. Anything you build while working here, whether it's on the clock or not, falls under corporate rights." It was a lie. I'd read the clause thoroughly. It specified clearly that unless a project was built using company resources or within assigned duties, it was outside the company's IP claim. I explained this, politely but firmly. That's when the tone shifted. The next day, HR summoned me for a routine policy review. They asked me if I'd shared internal files publicly. I hadn't. Whether I had permission to present anything externally. I didn't share anything proprietary, and whether I was aware of potential violations of my employment agreement. It was a threat, veiled and petty, but unmistakable. Then Carl called me into a private meeting with two VPs. "We'd like to offer you a gesture of goodwill," he said, sliding an envelope across the table. Inside was a check for $1,000 and a short letter. It said that by signing, I'd relinquish any claims to the Pathweaver project and allow the company to evaluate and develop the concept internally moving forward. I looked at the check. $1,000. They wanted to buy me off for less than what I paid in server fees alone over the last year. "Let me be clear," I said slowly, pushing the envelope back. "Pathweaver is mine. It's protected under provisional patent, and I've documented everything. If you attempt to develop it without my involvement, you'll be in violation of IP law." The VPs exchanged glances. Carl's smile faded. "We're trying to resolve this professionally," one of them said. "And I'm trying to stop you from making a mistake," I replied. That night, I knew I had to make a choice, roll over or stand firm. I chose the latter. I reached out to the VP who had approached me at demo day and scheduled a follow-up. If Javelin Tech wanted war, they were about to get far more than they bargained for. The meeting with the VP from Atlas Freight Solutions took place in a quiet, glass-walled conference room at their local HQ. His name was Daniel Trent, and his presence was as polished as it was disarming. He didn't waste time on small talk. "I had my CTO review your demo video," he said as we shook hands. "He's been pacing in the hallway like a caffeinated wolf ever since." I laughed nervously. "That's either good or terrifying." He smiled. "It's very good. What you've built, Pathweaver, solves a problem we've been trying to patch with duct tape and prayer for 3 years. And if you're serious about licensing it, we'd like to talk numbers." I was serious. I'd never been more serious about anything in my life. Over the next 90 minutes, we reviewed technical diagrams, walked through performance metrics, and discussed integration layers. Daniel asked sharp questions, the kind only someone knee-deep in logistics nightmares could ask, and I answered every single one with precision. Pathweaver was ready. More than that, it was needed. Daniel confirmed they were prepared to offer a 3-year exclusive license starting at $3 million, contingent upon a 2-week stress test and a full code audit by their internal team. I blinked. My mouth went dry. $3 million. I kept my composure, barely, and asked if he needed time to finalize a formal term sheet. "It'll be in your inbox by Monday," he said, standing to shake my hand again. "Congratulations, Sarah. You just changed your life." And just like that, I had leverage. But I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because I knew what was coming. Javelin Tech wasn't going to let go of this quietly. Sure enough, by the end of the week, I received a cease and desist letter on Javelin Tech letterhead, claiming I had violated their intellectual property policy and demanding that I stop all attempts to license company-developed technology. It was absurd. They hadn't written a single line of code. The only company involvement was their repeated refusal to greenlight or support Pathweaver. I immediately forwarded the letter to my attorney, Alyssa, who sent back a single-sentence reply: "They're bluffing, and we're going to bury them with proof." We compiled the defense dossier over the weekend, every commit, every timestamp, every receipt from hardware, software, and server costs that had come from my own pocket. We included a notarized copy of the provisional patent filing, and even screenshots of Slack messages where Carl himself had dismissed the idea as impractical and out of scope. Monday morning, Alyssa sent Javelin Tech a formal response that could have shattered concrete. It included a threat to file a countersuit for harassment, IP theft, and retaliation if they didn't retract their claims. We also CC'd the Atlas Freight legal team, just to let them know where things stood. By Tuesday, Javelin Tech's tune had changed. I received a panicked call from HR, asking if I'd be open to a mediation meeting. I didn't take it. I had already moved on. That Friday, I inked the deal with Atlas. It was surreal, signing a multi-million-dollar licensing agreement in the same week the company I once begged to listen tried to erase me. But it felt right. I wasn't just defending my work, I was claiming what I'd built. The announcement of the deal hit industry news the following Monday. Independent developer secures landmark logistics tech licensing agreement, the headline read. It didn't mention Javelin Tech by name, but people connected the dots quickly. And the fallout was instant. My inbox exploded. Former coworkers congratulated me in whispers, saying things like, "I always knew you were onto something, and they really underestimated you." Recruiters started reaching out. Founders wanted to meet. Investors asked if I had more ideas in the pipeline. And then Carl called. I let it go to voicemail, but I listened. "Sarah, look, I want to talk. There's been a lot of confusion, and maybe some things were said that didn't reflect the respect we have for your work. I think there's still a way to move forward. Call me." I didn't call him. Instead, I made another call to Atlas. I told Daniel I wanted to expand the license terms slightly. Not for more money, but for broader scope. I wanted to ensure Pathweaver could be implemented across multiple industries, with co-branding attached to every deployment. He agreed. And just like that, my name was no longer a footnote. It was on the masthead. Over the next few weeks, I hired a small but brilliant dev team. We set up a remote office space and started building the next-gen version of the platform. We called the company Lucent Grid, a nod to clarity in complexity. I didn't want revenge. I wanted revolution. I wanted to build a place where no one had to beg to be heard. But Javelin Tech wasn't done. Out of desperation, or maybe spite, they attempted to roll out their own version of smart logistics optimization a month after our deal went public. They called it ClearChain. The problem? It barely worked. Their platform was buggy, inefficient, and clearly rushed to market. Worse, someone leaked an internal memo comparing it directly to Pathweaver. The memo admitted their version was years behind in architecture and deployment readiness. The industry noticed. Atlas didn't just dominate the next trade quarter, they blew projections out of the water. Pathweaver had shaved 18% off their total shipping costs within 8 weeks of launch. Testimonials flooded in from their partners. And in a moment I'll never forget, Daniel forwarded me an internal email from his COO that simply read, "This tech saved our fiscal year. Give her whatever she needs." Javelin Tech went silent after that. They stopped contacting me, pulled ClearChain from beta, and even scrubbed press mentions about their internal innovation efforts. Carl resigned 3 weeks later. I didn't gloat. I didn't even post a single comment online. But quietly, privately, I smiled. Not because they lost, but because I didn't need them anymore. And they knew it. The success of the Atlas deal wasn't just a personal milestone, it was a public declaration. Every tech news outlet wanted the story. Podcasters emailed daily. And, in a move I never expected, 2 major logistics trade magazines requested a full interview and feature spread. They titled it, "The Woman Who Rewired Freight Tech." I wasn't ready for the limelight, but I embraced it. The world needed to know how easy it was for companies to smother innovation from the inside. Lucent Grid grew rapidly. Within 2 months, I hired 5 full-time engineers, 2 salespeople, and a brilliant product manager named Juno who had left a Fortune 500 role to join the mission. Our team was small, but our ambition was massive. And we worked like it. Meanwhile, whispers about Javelin Tech's internal chaos reached me weekly. Their top software architect resigned. Their board had called for a review of the failed ClearChain launch. People were blaming Carl for pushing an undercooked platform just to beat me to market. I didn't dance on his downfall. I didn't have to. The facts were enough. Then, just when things felt stable, Javelin Tech struck back. I was served a lawsuit. They filed a civil claim in federal court alleging unauthorized use of proprietary development resources and misappropriation of internal R&D knowledge. In plain English, they were claiming Pathweaver was born from company-owned IP and that the $3 million license deal was based on stolen property. The timing was obvious. They were losing control of the narrative and needed a legal bombshell to stall my momentum. But they didn't know what I'd prepared for. My lawyer, Alyssa, went into war mode. They want headlines. We'll give them subpoenas instead, she said coldly. We countersued immediately for defamation, intentional interference with business relations, and attempted IP theft. The courtroom drama ignited the tech community. LinkedIn, Twitter, Reddit, all lit up with commentary. Developers across the industry sided with me. They shared their own horror stories of corporate theft, of pitch decks stolen, of side projects turned into company products with no credit. I became something I never intended, a symbol of rebellion against corporate exploitation. But lawsuits weren't fought in hashtags. They were fought in depositions, emails, and paper trails. Luckily, I had all of that. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. A former Javelin Tech employee, Maria, from legal, reached out anonymously through a burner email. She had quietly resigned after seeing how Carl and the board tried to retroactively fabricate documentation suggesting Pathweaver had been a company-led initiative. She attached screenshots, internal emails, meeting summaries that directly contradicted the company's public narrative. There were notes showing Carl had mocked the platform as naive in a boardroom pitch. Another showed an internal Slack thread where Carl wrote, "She's wasting her weekends, let her burn out." I nearly cried when I read those. Not out of sadness. Out of relief. I had proof. We entered it into discovery, and Javelin Tech's legal team went silent for days. Then came the email. They wanted to settle. They offered to drop the suit entirely if I withdrew the countersuit and agreed not to mention the dispute in any future press. Alyssa stared at the email, deadpan. "What do you want to do?" I thought for a moment. "No gag order," I said. "They tried to destroy me. People deserve to know how they operate." She nodded. Then we moved forward. What came next wasn't just a win, it was a reckoning. We didn't just reject the settlement, we escalated. Alyssa filed for an expedited hearing. With all the documentation from Maria, the provisional patent timestamps, Git history, and statements from Atlas Freight's CTO praising the platform's originality, our case was airtight. Javelin Tech scrambled. Their PR department put out a half-hearted statement about ongoing IP inquiries and internal restructuring, but it didn't hold. A major blog published an exposé with the headline, "They said it was their idea." She had the receipts. The story went viral. The article quoted an anonymous Javelin Tech source, likely Maria, stating that the company was trying to retroactively steal thunder after rejecting what became a market-defining tool. A week later, Carl resigned. Not quietly, either. A leaked internal memo revealed that the board had lost confidence in his judgment after he approved the ClearChain launch and initiated a lawsuit that backfired catastrophically. The memo didn't even try to spin it, it called it a lapse in leadership and a failure in risk management. As for me, the courtroom battle became a footnote. Javelin Tech dropped their suit with prejudice. That meant they could never bring the same case again. Our countersuit went to arbitration, and after reviewing the evidence, the arbitrator awarded Lucent Grid $420,000 in damages. That money went directly into product development. We weren't done. Not even close. The real climax came 6 weeks later, at the National Logistics and Supply Tech Conference in Atlanta. I was invited as a keynote speaker, me, the person Javelin Tech once offered $1,000 to quietly disappear. I stood on a stage in front of 3,000 people and told the entire story. Not just the technology. Not just the business deal. But the betrayal. The fight. The lesson. My closing words still echo in my mind. Innovation doesn't need permission. It needs vision. If you're building something in your garage, your basement, your dorm room, don't wait for validation. Especially not from the people who don't see you until it's too late. The applause lasted almost 2 full minutes. Backstage, I was approached by CEOs, investors, and 2 former Javelin Tech employees who had since joined rival companies. One hugged me. "You did what all of us dream about." That night, Lucent Grid's site crashed from the traffic spike. We landed 2 more licensing deals before the end of the month, one with a European distribution giant and another with a mid-sized trucking SaaS company out of Canada. The combined value of those deals? Nearly $2.1 million. My inbox changed overnight. No longer filled with vague pitches or "we'd love to learn more" emails. These were concrete offers. Partnerships. Term sheets. VC funds offering seed capital. I wasn't chasing anymore. I was choosing. I made a quiet trip past the old Javelin Tech office one evening. The lights were still on, but the energy was gone. Their parking lot was half empty. Their front desk had been replaced by a touchscreen check-in station. And the receptionist, Becca, the only person who ever treated me kindly, was no longer there. I didn't feel bitter. I felt clean. Because in the end, I had done something they never thought I could do. I bet on myself, and won. The next day, I signed with an investor group led by a woman named Noelle, a former aerospace engineer turned VC. Her message during due diligence was simple: I don't want to fund another startup. I want to fund a statement. Lucent Grid raised $6.5 million in a Series A round. I gave every engineer a raise. Hired 10 more. Launched a second product roadmap. And started a podcast called Built Without Permission, where I interviewed creators and developers who'd been underestimated, rejected, or silenced by traditional corporate structures. The first episode hit 200,000 downloads in its first week. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us. All the developers coding late into the night. All the designers pitching ideas that got stolen. All the interns whose mock-ups became billion-dollar products they never saw a dime from. We were building something better. Louder. Transparent. And Javelin Tech? They were just another warning now. A footnote in the future we refused to let them erase. After the dust settled from the lawsuit and media frenzy, something unexpected happened. I began getting emails from complete strangers. Developers. Interns. Mid-level engineers. A few senior managers. They all had a variation of the same story: this happened to me too. Some shared confidential screenshots, others sent detailed recounts of how their ideas had been dismissed, then stolen. A junior data scientist described how she'd pitched a new logistics forecasting algorithm at a quarterly hackathon. The company told her it was too complex, only to present it 6 months later at a tech expo, without credit. Another young man wrote about his e-commerce optimization tool that got folded into a bigger team's roadmap while he was reassigned to help desk duties. These weren't just tech industry woes. They were symptoms of a broken culture. A system that rewarded politics over performance and structure over innovation. Reading these stories, I realized something: Lucent Grid couldn't just be a company. It had to be a movement. We started by hosting a digital roundtable, an open invite event for creators to share ideas, swap stories, and give advice. We expected maybe 40 signups. Over 600 people showed up. I remember staring at the Zoom screen, scrolling through names, recognizing developers from across the world. India, Germany, Nigeria, Canada. All united by the same frustration and hope. We launched the Build Forum a week later. A Slack-style online community built for engineers, indie hackers, and bootstrappers. Within a month, it had over 8,000 active members. Not just complaining, collaborating. People started building together. Exchanging contracts. Launching side projects as full businesses. Lucent Grid became more than a logistics tech startup, it became the home base for independent builders. But with visibility came new challenges. One day, while reviewing our platform metrics, I noticed a curious pattern: multiple anonymous users probing our API endpoints. Not bots. Real accounts. They were stress testing our system, mimicking behavior that suggested internal reconnaissance. My CTO, Eli, ran a trace. The IP addresses led to, unsurprisingly, Javelin Tech HQ. They were still watching. Still hoping, maybe, that I'd slip. That I'd fall into the trap so many early-stage founders did, scaling too fast, chasing features without securing core infrastructure. They were going to be disappointed. Because we'd spent months tightening our backend, fortifying our security, and optimizing redundancy. Lucent Grid didn't just survive under scrutiny, it thrived. We pushed regular patches, tested exploits weekly, and our dev team was trained in ethical hacking and failover protocols. We even brought in a cybersecurity consultant from the fintech world to audit our system, who said, "You've got better safeguards than some banks I've seen." Meanwhile, media interest shifted from the legal drama to our product. Tech blogs called Pathweaver the silent revolution of supply chains. Logistics CEOs referred to it as the nervous system that finally connects all the limbs. Even government departments took notice. One reached out privately asking about the possibility of deploying a version for emergency response logistics. I sat back one evening, laptop open, looking at a heat map of all the companies using our platform. Little red dots glowed across 5 continents. We had truly gone global. But not everything was smooth. The success brought tension within the team. Juno, our head product manager, felt overwhelmed. She'd been brilliant during our scrappy startup days, but the speed and volume of enterprise partnerships coming in pushed her past her comfort zone. She pulled me aside after a sprint review and said, "I love this. I do. But I don't know if I can lead the next version of Pathweaver. Not alone." I appreciated her honesty. We weren't the same company anymore. What we needed now was a layer of operational maturity. So we hired a senior VP of product, someone who had scaled systems at 3 different SaaS unicorns. Juno stayed on, transitioned into a role that let her mentor younger PMs then focus on strategy without getting buried in execution. It was a reminder that growth meant evolution, not just in tech, but in people. Around this time, we got approached by a major private equity firm. They weren't offering investment. They were offering an acquisition. Their number? $28 million. It was tempting. Very tempting. especially for my team, many of whom had left high-paying jobs to take a chance on Lucent Grid. A few were eager to cash in. Some even pressured me to consider it seriously. But something about the offer didn't sit right. Not the money. The tone. The email mentioned absorbing core IP and transitioning valuable technical assets. Nowhere did it mention our mission, our team, our users. It felt more like a quiet dismantling than a partnership. So I gathered everyone for an all-hands meeting. And I said this. This company started because someone thought I'd walk away for $1,000. I didn't then, and I'm not walking away now. If we build something worth buying, we've already built something worth keeping. Let's not sell the car just because it finally starts. There was silence. Then applause. Real, spontaneous applause. Even from the team members who'd been on the fence. One engineer emailed me later, "You just gave the speech I'll remember for the rest of my life." We turned down the offer. A week later, we signed 2 more deals worth more than half that number. And Javelin Tech? They tried to pivot. Tried to rebrand. Announced a new initiative to support entrepreneurship inside their org. Promised to listen to builders. It was too little, too late. Their top VP left to start his own firm. Investors pulled out of their Series D funding round. Their stock price dipped for the first time in 8 quarters. Because you can't fake culture. You can't patch trust. And they'd already shown the world who they were. 3 months after we declined the $28 million acquisition offer, I found myself standing on the stage at Founders Forge, a premier global tech conference known for launching some of the biggest names in innovation. What started as a side hustle and a personal redemption arc had now become one of the most watched companies in the logistics AI space. Our keynote slot? Prime time. As I looked out over the packed auditorium, I thought about everything that had led to this moment, the late nights, the betrayals, the humiliation of being offered $1,000 for something worth millions. The day they erased my name. The lawsuit. The relentless doubt. And yet, here I was, about to reveal Pathweaver 2.0. Our new version was sleeker, smarter, and faster. We'd added real-time supplier risk mapping, AI-powered procurement routing, and cross-border regulation forecasting using LLM integration. The entire thing could be deployed on private cloud or hybrid environments, with onboarding in under 72 hours. The demo went flawlessly. And then came the applause, louder and longer than I expected. Some attendees even stood up. In that moment, I wasn't just a founder with a good product. I was the guy who stood his ground, who turned rejection into revolution. The media response afterward was a whirlwind. TechCrunch called us the revenge story Silicon Valley didn't know it needed. Wired published a long-form feature titled The $1,000 That Cost Them $3 million. My inbox filled with speaking requests, podcast invites, and a few cautiously worded emails from Javelin Tech execs. Yes, they reached out. It wasn't an apology. More like a diplomatic olive branch. One email read, "Despite our past, we acknowledge the impact Lucent Grid is making. Perhaps there's opportunity for alignment moving forward." I didn't even bother replying. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. Especially when the other side only wants to cross once they're sinking. But I wasn't bitter. In fact, I was oddly grateful. If they hadn't tried to crush me, I might never have built what we had now. Their betrayal had been the exact pressure I needed to stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like an owner. Like a leader. Back at Lucent Grid, the pace didn't slow down. Our team had grown from 8 people to 52. We had offices in Austin, Berlin, and Bangalore. We rolled out partnerships with 3 Fortune 500 logistics giants, offering white-label versions of Pathweaver tailored to their internal systems. We also created a freemium developer platform so small startups could access our optimization tools. That move opened unexpected doors. One weekend, I got a message from a 19-year-old founder in Kenya who'd used our freemium stack to reduce food waste by 22% in Nairobi street markets. He couldn't afford our enterprise package yet, but he wanted us to know what he'd built. I called him personally, offered him 6 months of enterprise access for free, and said, "Just pay it forward when you win." That's what we were building, a new kind of ecosystem, one where innovation didn't require a fancy title or corporate blessing. But not everyone welcomed our rise. One of our major competitors, an aging logistics software company with legacy contracts across Asia and the Middle East, began a quiet smear campaign. They circulated whispers about our scalability, suggested our AI wasn't fully compliant, and even tried poaching some of our lead engineers with double salaries. It was classic disruption pushback. We didn't panic. Instead, we doubled down on transparency. We published our architecture white papers, released a public compliance dashboard, and held monthly open forums where users could ask hard questions. The result? More trust. More conversions. More loyalty. Meanwhile, I kept mentoring others, especially those who'd been burned like I had. I started a quarterly session called the Idea Vault, where early-stage developers could pitch their ideas in a protected space. No stealing. No sharks. Just builders helping builders. At one of those sessions, a quiet kid named Omar pitched a tool that could predict customs delays using social media sentiment in port cities. I paired him with one of our ex-data leads. 6 months later, Omar had a working MVP and 4 paying clients. That's the kind of ripple effect I wanted to see, not just success, but succession. By the end of the year, Lucent Grid hit a major milestone, $3 million in licensing revenue from our core Pathweaver tech stack. The same IP they once tried to buy off me for $1,000. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. One night, we celebrated quietly at the office. Pizza. Champagne. Nothing flashy. Just the team sitting on beanbags and floor cushions, laughing over inside jokes and war stories. At some point, Juno turned to me and said, "You remember the day you walked out of that conference room, right after they lowballed you?" I nodded. Of course I remembered. Every single second. She smiled and added, "You didn't just walk out. You walked forward. And we followed." That hit me harder than I expected. Because that's what this was always about. Not revenge. Not proving them wrong. But proving ourselves right. Creating something that would outlive the pettiness, the politics, and the old ways of doing business. Lucent Grid wasn't just a company anymore. It was a standard. And as we looked ahead, toward new tech, new markets, and new dreams, I realized something else. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a future they never saw coming. Looking back now, it still amazes me how a moment that felt like the end of everything became the foundation for something far greater. All they offered me was $1,000, a dismissal wrapped in arrogance. They saw me as a disposable engineer, a quiet mind behind code they thought they could control. What they didn't see was the storm I was about to become. The journey wasn't clean. It wasn't easy. It was full of silent doubts, sleepless nights, and the kind of loneliness only founders truly understand. But with every step, I chose progress over pride, vision over validation. I didn't fight them just to win. I fought to build what they could never imagine. And in doing so, I created a company not from anger, but from belief. Belief in my ideas. Belief in people who refuse to be overlooked. Belief in the power of execution. Lucent Grid isn't just a business. It's a message to every builder who's ever been told to sit down, to take the deal, to walk away. Don't. If you know what you've created has value, real value, then hold your ground. Because sometimes the world doesn't need another boardroom decision. Sometimes it needs one person who refuses to disappear. Now, when I look at the IP license proudly signed and protected under our name, worth over $3 million and climbing, I don't see revenge. I see redemption. I see a blueprint for others to follow. I see a $1,000 insult transformed into a global enterprise. They tried to buy me out for pocket change. Instead, I built something priceless. And no matter how big they once were, the truth is simple: they'll always be the company that underestimated the wrong guy.